Special interests is the word that's commonly used to describe the interests that autistic people engage with on a deep level for autistic joy and for wellness. But to be honest, the term special interest is a little bit, special, and it can kind of feel a little bit infantilizing, I think, sometimes. And some of the interests that we have can sometimes be a little bit not stuck to a particular age group. So how do we, as adults, talk about and engage in that kind of culture of special interests?
I think understanding where special interests develop from and where they come from really helps sort of push that narrative that it's not just something for children. Autistic people love making closely related links in their minds because what we do is we see things and we just want to understand them. That means that when we fall in love with something when we're young, be like the stereotypical ones like trains, like Lego, Pokemon, which is one very close to my heart, we just want to know more and more about it. And we never really move on from it because we become so obsessive and so in love with it. And it follows us into adulthood. When we want to learn something new or we do something else, because our mind really does focus on making these small links, we use our special interests to make sense of the world. And then it stops being this thing that maybe was aimed at children at first into something that is really helping push forward adolescence and maturity. When I talk about Pokemon, I find it fascinating that they're based on real animals. That's interesting as an adult, but if you tell it to a kid, it's not interesting. So you make it an adult thing by talking about why it still interests you now, as opposed to just going, oh, I love Pokemon, full stop.
And I think listening to you talk, it kind of makes me realise what we need to do in order to have these dialogues is we need to normalise this joy for a topic. And I think what's happened more and more in the autism community lately is the expression that it's really joyful to listen to someone else talk about their special interest, even if it's not an interest that you have, because you get the intensity even if you don't get the interest, and you can see that same joy that you experience, and it kind of makes your experience feel normalised and feel right and kind of takes the whole weirdness out of it. I feel a little bit like, as someone who presents as female, that makes the special interest thing even more complicated, because I think it's always been slightly more acceptable for men to have these kind of interests, in that you think back to the past of the kind of husband who had his train set up in the attic and, guy that used to like to go down to the garage to tinker with engines, right? And that was kind of more normalised, whereas for women what was normalised was more sort of superficial social encounters and different qualities were considered strengths. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think bringing gender is a really interesting thing, because I think the special interest that I have is in people and social interaction, and that is seen, that isn't really looked into. And I'd like to watch what would happen and hear stories from other people, and that, is quite a normal interest for a young girl, you might say, is to have that socialization. But I also struggled to make friends, and I struggled within some friendships that I had. Now a lot of my friendships that were really strong, I'm finding out they were also autistic, because we do a lot of echoing what each other was saying, write a lot of silly songs, talked about the things that we were interested in and kind of shared that, and had that space where we could just be ourselves. Whereas I struggled with other people my own age because I just didn't know what to talk about. I didn't know how to behave, and sometimes felt that I was being weird, but didn't quite know how, because in my family I was so normal. Like, everyone was like, oh yeah, Ros is Ros, she just does Ros. So I think those special interests, like young girl that's interested in horses or Barbies, it isn't seen as a special interest. It's just been like, oh yeah, no, she loves her Barbies, she loves her makeup, she loves that. And that passion isn't looked at in the same way that it is in boys. If a boy's super obsessed with trains and wants to tell you everything about it. And I think that is, how our society is set up. It's like, oh no, it's all right for, a girl to only talk about makeup all the time. But it's like, well, actually, is there something, else going on? Is she getting some kind of joy out of that we're not noticing and not able to tap into?
I think for me, as a young child, I had more kind of stereotypically, I guess, male special interests. So I was really into Spider-Man. I wore a Spider-Man costume exclusively for a full year. Quite proud of that. And I was into Lego, and I was into trains, and I had a Pokemon phase as a child. And so I feel like maybe that stood out more, and that made me feel that those interests were even more unacceptable, which kind of also added to that feeling that I think a lot of us get as we get older, that we have to leave our special interests that we've had maybe for quite a long time behind, because maybe they're now not age appropriate, because we're seeing all of our peers move on from those kinds of interests. And I know that you talked about having that experience with Pokemon, James.
It's something I really loved for primary school, for high school, but as you start to get to college, I'd bring up in conversations, I'd see them start moving away, and I'd feel very, like I was saying something wrong, I'd feel uncomfortable, I'd feel like I took a few faux pas. So I just stopped talking about it, tried to stop thinking about it, tried to start being more adolescent, I guess, in my interests. And I kind of lost my way. Like I was using Pokemon a lot to make sense of the world. It sounds strange, but like I'm awful with time management. But when I knew that a Pokemon episode was half an hour, people would say to me, "Oh, James, you'll be needed to go here in 4 Pokemon episode lengths time." And I'd go, "Okay, that made perfect sense to me." The moment I stopped watching Pokemon, stopped playing Pokemon, stopped finding out as much as I could about it, my time management skills got awful. I used to think when things were going wrong and I needed something to sort of root me down, I needed information that would lock me in place, I would go through the Pokemon and I'd think about what each one evolves into and what each one's strong enough against. And there's always that thing of, because certain facts about that never change, that was always going to stay the same. And psychologically, that made me feel secure, that made me feel comfortable. I didn't have that anymore. And when my grades started to slip in college due to a lot of things, I just had nothing that I could sort of fall back on. I could only just keep thinking about why I was failing. And I went to university and I found out that universities have clubs for everything. And there was a Pokemon club and I was like, great, it's okay to like things. If it does seem childish to someone else, that doesn't matter. If it makes you happy, you do it. And I got back into it and really got back into it. And it's just helped me like come leaps and bounds in university because I just was so more confident in myself, knowing that I had an escape that was always going to be there and it was still going there. It just brought me back on track a lot quicker than if I just tried a million different other methods.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Like, I was really excited when I discovered the adult fans of Lego community because I loved Lego as a kid and then just kind of stopped doing it, and then had children and they got into Lego. And I remember we were at like Legoland or something like that, and I decided I wanted to buy myself a set. I was like, I'm allowed to do this. And my husband was like, yeah, you need to get one of the Lego architecture sets. These are the sets made for adults. They're white and they're landmarks of the world. And I was like, I want the Scooby-Doo mobile. I don't want the boring, but I like bought the boring white. I think it was a Trevi fountain, very dull, because I felt like it was like a compromise. Like he was okay with me building Lego, but only if it was adult Lego. And I guess I knew he was starting to understand what I needed in terms of special interests when 6 months later he did buy me the Scooby-Doo van to make. And since then I have definitely not restricted myself to the 18 and over Lego sets. It's not just something that's really pleasant for us to experience. I think that these interests are a part of our wellness. Like when I see you talk about Pokemon, I can see you visibly relax and you look happy, and that makes me feel happy. Would you say that your special interests are important for your wellness, Ros?
Yeah, definitely. I also think that in terms of learning skills, like my special interest being social skills taught me how to talk to people, because at some point I was a selective mute when I was younger, and when I got to about 15, 16, I was like, well, I can't find out any more about people unless I actually start interacting with them. And so, I took what I'd learned from my time, watching people, and was like, I'll just try this out, a little bit at a time. It's helped me get to where I am today. And sometimes I still struggle with the same things, but I have that interest to fall back on when I just want to research something and get really deep into something specific about occupation and how we engage in occupation. It's almost like my interest is occupation and how we do things. And so doing special interests can build your skills in lots of different areas. Some people want to use special interests as a reward in autism, and I'm like, there is a way that you can do that, but you can't make it just a reward, because that's not what a special interest is. It's not you do this and you get to engage in your special interest. It's like you should get to engage in your special interests all the time, but also you have to do these things to engage in society. And unfortunately, we need to engage in society sometimes.
How do you think that your special interests benefit you in terms of your wellness day to day, James?
One of the special interests that I got into as I sort of got a bit older was into programming, into computers, into development. And it's quite easy to see how that can sort of move from, being something that interests me to something that I can use as an occupation and sort of make a livelihood out of that. But I think you can also look outside of that, and I think I always find it interesting. There was like a INSAR conference a few years ago where they listed all the adult special interests. Females was the top one was music and bands. Males, it was computers and programming. But then the second for both of them was autism itself. So you can see that the special interests help benefit autistic people by not just being an expression, but helping them gain that sort of self-understanding of who they are.
I mean, that makes total sense, really, doesn't it? If anybody found out your brain is different to standard, who wouldn't want to go and know as much about that as they can? And then if you're autistic, you're obviously going to take that next level, right?
When I first started my online site, it was because I'd been autistic for so long that I just thought that I knew everything about autism because it was me. But I've had to go out and learn more about it because when I do things, I understand why I'm doing them, but I can also get to the root of it and work out what I need to change or what I can sort of do in the long run to sort of benefit from that. And really having autism as a special interest just means I'm always uncovering more and more about myself and always benefiting. So almost like as much as I give back to autism, I gain from it.
Yeah, having autism as a special interest is basically made me employable at this point. Like, ahead of having that, I kind of was drifting and I didn't really feel like I had anything. Sounds really cheesy, but I didn't really feel like I had anything to offer the world outside of my regular roles as like a mother and a partner. And but I wanted something that was for me. And so I think often, but not always, special interests can end up being like a really great path into a career. But I think it's also important that some special interests be kept just as interests. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. So I make my own earrings. I've not actually made the ones I'm wearing today, which is unfortunate for this bit. But I make my own earrings out of things that I find. And so many times people go, oh, you could sell those, like you could make money out of them. And I go, well, I don't want to. Like, I make them out of things I find because I like to find things and go, oh, that would look cool on an earring. And then I want to wear them myself or give them to people that I know. To make it into a business would be to add all these things to it. Like, I'd have to figure out postage, I'd have to figure out how much to charge, and it makes it something else. To make earrings as a job would be to take the joy that I feel making them out of it. And I don't think that would be true for everyone who makes earrings. I think if someone had that interest in, making the same earrings or making earrings that were similar, that joy could be had from selling them. But that's not the joy I get from it. So there's something about identifying, well, what is the joy that you get from it? Similar to if your interest is computer programming and you get a job, it's about finding that job that allows you to follow your interest, because you could get a job in computer programming that doesn't allow you to do the thing about that programming that is the thing that you love, that is the thing that you enjoy. And so, yeah, it's kind of difficult to find a career out of the thing you love, but it can be really rewarding if you do it.
So for newly diagnosed autistic people who might not have kind of identified or even have a special interest, would you have any advice for trying out stuff or recognizing something you already do and diving deep in that in the way that we're describing?
I think if you don't think you have a special interest, you do need to consider what things that you might talk about more than the usual people, because chances are you probably do have a special interest, you just haven't realised it. Like, anything can be a special interest, like technology, like very precise sort of the minutiae of something like a certain type of flower that you're obsessed with. That might actually be a special interest and you haven't worked that out yet. I think if you just go out and you find that something's really captured your attention and you keep thinking about it, go out and find out more about it, and then find out more about what you found out about, and that will just become your special interest quite naturally.
Yeah, that's so true, because I feel like sometimes you can feel like your special interest isn't special interest enough if you don't quite know enough about it. So, like, I am very passionate about Doctor Who. It's my absolute favourite franchise, if you like. But I don't really love or engage in the minute details of the storyline and the characters. I just like having the figures or drawing pictures about Doctor Who. So I'm like engaging it in a deep way, but not in terms of amassing a huge amount of knowledge. And so I think there's like a really important point to be made that there's no like set thing you need to be doing with this in order for it to qualify as a special interest. If it feels like it's benefiting you and if it feels like something that you need to do as part of your life to feel well, probably you've found your special interest, right? There's also a thing that happens where you might fall out of love with your special interest and not have found a new special interest and be like between interests, if you like, and then you do have to kind of go and seek out something new. As an OT, how would you approach doing that?
I'd always consider my mental health at this point. Like, how open am I to new things? Because if you're at the point where you're like, actually, I've lost my special interest and I'm a bit stressed, it's looking back and going, well, what else have I been interested in the past? And what if I try that again? But then if you're in a better place and you're like, actually, I'm in a really good place, I've lost a special interest, going out and trying something new, just think, what in the past has someone talked about that I've maybe gone, oh yeah, pottery always looked interesting. And then, maybe starting out by going to a class or, buying some clay to use at home, like doing something very small and simple, maybe taking a friend with you. Understand that at first you've got that anxiety around doing something new. It's going to take some time to get into something, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be like your world straight away. You can just try something. Like going with a friend who is already interested in something is also a really good way to get into a special interest, is to find a friend and go, well, what do you like doing? Do you go to a group already? Do you like watch a TV show already? How about you show it to me and have someone take you into their special interest? So there's a few different paths, and I'd say consider like where you're at in terms of your emotions, and then go from there, like go for what you're comfortable with at the time.
I think you raised a really excellent point there, that if you fall out of love with your special interest or suddenly it stops appealing to you, that's actually really important to pay attention to from like a mental health standpoint. That could be like the canary in the coal mine, that something's going wrong in your life, and that the thing that was so precious to you suddenly is just unappealing, and you might want to sort of reflect on what's going on and what could be done differently to bring that interest back, or just to put your life back on track if it is an indicator of something worse.
Yeah, absolutely. So my special interests are Doctor Who, Marvel, Lego and tea. What are your special interests, James?
I feel like ever the stereotype. I like programming, Pokemon. I love maths. Like I love just doing sums. I think as much as if it's about finding out all the information to certain things, I love things that just make sense, that there's no vagueness, there's no subtlety to it. I think that's why myself and a lot of other autistic people love dinosaurs as well, because they're gone. They're not going to change. Obviously, you find out new information, but that information usually stays quite still because they're not coming back. Hopefully, not coming back. Or maybe it would be good if they come. Discussion for a different time.
Ros, what are your special interests?
One of my special interests is people and kind of psychology, and also that kind of takes me into like neuroscience. So I've read a lot of neuroscience books. I also am interested in occupation, so how and why we do the things that we do. My interests aren't necessarily set in stone, which makes them kind of difficult sometimes to engage with, because I want that kind of answer. But the answer I'm seeking, I'm like, oh, it's all very nuanced. It's all a matter of perspective. And so I quite like engaging in that kind of like middle ground, but it can be quite stressful sometimes, because I love theory. I love the theory of occupation. I love the theory behind psychology, and to really like delving into the theories of, why we live the way we live, like how societies work. One of my interests when I was younger was Patsy Cline, the 50s singer. I don't know if that's a traditional one, but I learned a lot about Patsy Cline. I went really deep and I got a lot of her CDs.
I can totally relate, because I did learn everything that I could learn about David Bowie.
I love art, and I love, finding out about different artists and going to galleries. I love historical romance novels, and I love books. I love stories. I love the stories we tell. So I think, we've touched on a lot around special interests at the moment, and there are ways in which people try and use them for therapies and try and use them for careers. But I think the most important thing that, we want to communicate is that just enjoy it. Just get into the joy of it and just live it and breathe it, and, go through life and have it be the thing that gets you up in the morning, because that's one of the things I find. It's the thing that gets you up. It's the thing that gets you engaged. And it's the thing that can get you connected with other networks of other people that also share that joy. And then you can have that really joyful moment of either sharing your special interest with someone who knows what it's like, or, as James said, sharing it with someone that's never experienced it before, and having that joy of bringing someone into the world that you've enjoyed so much.
So if you found this video helpful, please like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, and check out the description box for more information.